So what are the key ingredients? Firstly, you've got to unpack the rubric demands because that's where the HSC exam committee is going to take all your questions. So you need to know them inside out. Whether you make up some sort of wrap around them or whether you just put them on the wall where you can see them every day, when you are at school with your friends, with your teacher, try to brainstorm as many HSC questions as you can based on the rubric and covering all of those key words that can be asked. That way you're going to focus on the key concepts of the prescribed text, and each of the modules has a certain conceptual framework that we'll talk about. And within the text themselves there are key concepts, overarching big picture ideas that you need to get. It's not enough just to talk about the themes or talk about the language. You need to get where they're coming from first. What is that overarching meaning that matters? Thirdly, and this will make you stand out in the marking centre, because what I find, this is where a lot of essays fall down. Students tend to do this quite superficial overview of a text in terms of the module, but they don't actually dive in deep and grab those really great textual details, and that's referred to in a marking centre as the judicious choice of textual details. Judicious means to judge, to pick the right moments in a text, the amazing lines in a piece of poetry, the right moment or mise en scene in a film. So it's all about choosing those textual details to actually support your thesis statements, your reading of a text. And you do need to learn those quotes that matter. Don't learn great slabs of quotes. The marker's not going to look at all those quotes. They just want really nice, quite short, integrated quotes that are fitted within your writing as you're uncovering the meaning. And I imagine your teachers tell you this all the time, but I can't stress this enough with paper 2. Practice, practice, and practice. You just need to keep on doing this to so many different questions, because without it, it's almost impossible to do well in this paper. So let's talk about the essays then. And this is generally talking, and then as I get into the modules, I'll become more specific. First of all, as I stated earlier, you need an overarching thesis through the question to a specific line of argument. Your overarching thesis is guided by the question. In fact, the question is the driver. You can't ignore it. You can't top and tail, which means learn an essay off by heart, just put an introduction and a conclusion in that fits the question and hope you do well. You're going to find yourself in the C range. So you need an overarching thesis through the question, your point of view. You can prepare for this. You can actually prepare for each of the modules a number of really great thesis statements drawn from the rubric, which means you're going to be ready for any question they ask you. You're then going to use the key terms of the question to create that actual thesis in the exam conditions. Once you've got that overarching thesis and essay, you then need 1 or 2 supporting arguments or ideas that further the thesis and address the question. I refer to these as sub-theses. To be honest, the perfect combination seems to be 2. Your overarching thesis through the question, 2 sub-thesis statements that actually develop that idea and support that idea. And they work quite beautifully in an essay in an introduction as well and throughout the essay. Then I imagine your teachers have told you topic sentences that signpost the ideas and build the argument. Just a note of warning here. I find really great little mini essays within essays, in other words, fabulous topic sentences, great big ideas. Then they'll explain and then they'll provide an example and then they repeat the thesis statement again. So what happens is each one of those paragraphs becomes a little island on its own within an essay, rather than you navigating your marker through the essay. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. So that brings me to this. Transition sentences to me are more important almost than a topic sentence because they link the paragraphs together. So for example, you've just finished talking about Hamlet and you've talked about the form and you've talked about the structure. In your next paragraph, you actually want to talk about Hamlet himself and you want to talk about him as a Renaissance prince. So you would have just finished talking about the form and structure being subverted by Shakespeare himself and reflecting the Renaissance humanist idea of man's will. So you would pick up on that quote, maybe the word Renaissance, transition into your next paragraph on Hamlet himself using the word Renaissance. So it's that lovely navigation through the essay. The marker does not have to try and find their own pathway, you make it for them. In the body of the essays for each one of these modules, you need to do the how. This does not mean a shopping list of techniques. There's nothing worse than reading simile, metaphor, alliteration, assonance, and there's no meaning. It's the form, the structure, the language. Don't neglect form. I've found for the last couple of years now, the HSC English questions have actually asked you about form, and yet many students tend to neglect it. So make sure you know the form for every one of your prescribed texts and any related texts that you're using in your Module C, but also the structure that makes up that, and then the language that matters. So once you've got that first, you're not going to start with a technique, you're going to start with the idea. So you're privileging ideas in your essay writing. So you start with the idea first, then the technique in a quote, and the meaning that's conveyed again. And ensure that they're appropriate for the form of the text. For example, if you're doing a film, yes, you can do language features, but you must do the film language, the film techniques. If you're doing drama, don't ignore dramatic techniques. And also, if you've got a Module A with a comparative study and Module C where you've got text of own choosing, make sure you're aiming for integration, so you're discussing the two texts together. Moving between them becomes really important. Again, I'll talk more about that in Mod A and in Mod C. And how better to navigate your markers through your essay than the quality of the verbs that you use. The verbs are the powerhouse of essay writing. The closer you can put them to your subject at the start of the sentence, the better. And there's so many that you can actually use. For example, some of my favourite, because I like the sound of them, explicates. I love ascribes when you're talking about ascribing meaning. Advances the argument, affirms my opinion, challenges the way I see the text. Or even limes, which means he makes me see or she makes me see a certain way. Espouses, clarifies, proffers, promulgates. Just don't overdose on them. Don't have too many of the same. Try to move between them. And then there's the connectors. Remember I talked about navigating the marker through your essay? What better way to do it than with connectors? Because you are building an argument. Most English essays in paper 2 are evaluate, which means to weigh or to judge. So you're presenting your opinion and all the evidence around it. So of course, you're actually extending your argument through your textual analysis. So you're going to use words like furthermore, moreover, in contrast, alternatively, and the list goes on. You can even sort of set up your argument with things like indeed or interestingly enough, so that you're actually really engaging and showing your voice when you write an essay.